Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. Welcome, everyone, to an impromptu RazörForce offensive, for we received rumblings the last 24 hours that all was not well with one of my favorite franchises, Battletech. I've been dick deep into this shit since the 90s when I was introduced to the collectible card game and multiplayer Battletech on GameStorm, just in case you wanted me to age myself at Mach speed. So to see Catalyst at last cave to cancel culture brings my bladder to a roiling boil, folks. But I've already recapped the events of the last day or so, so I brought along a guest who can relay them in far finer a fashion than I ever could. The recipient of said cancel culture, writer and sculptor par excellence for this franchise since almost its inception, RazörForce, give the warmest one-finger salute to the quite based Blaine Lee Pardoe. So Blaine, anything happening lately, buddy?
No, it's been pretty quiet. Typical weekend for me.
I bet you're just waiting until events start to actually pick up at some point.
Well, yeah, this has been going on for months. This started in March, and
yeah, you know what? I'll set you up. This story kind of starts. The story's actually in sections. A lot of people are just hearing it now, and so their reflexive response, particularly if they're inclined already to side with the woke mob, is, well, he's just playing the victim because he's got a book to launch or whatever. And of course, this is a long-term story, and people like myself know that it's a long-term story because your stalker is now my stalker and many other people's stalker, and this has been going on for months and motherfucking months. So all the people who claim, you know, oh, he just wants to be out there to shill his latest book or whatever. No, he made this public a long, long time ago, what he was dealing with and whatever. So I just want to touch on the first part of this, which is, you know, when a dude pretending to be a chick begins to target you on social media and anyone who defends you. So I guess let's start there. What exactly precipitates this, and how did this Bolsheviks blood feud begin?
It was 2 years ago. And this person that claimed to be Faith McCloskey started dinging me. And it started out very cordial at first, and then it became, well, you're a neo-Confederate because you wrote an editorial saying you were against Confederate statues being torn down. And that part is true. I did. As a historian, I am against any statue being torn down. And at the time, bear in mind, this was years ago, I said, if they start tearing down Confederate statues, they'll start tearing down other statues. Gee, I was proven right on that.
Yeah, they absolutely did.
You know, and it has nothing to do with the Confederacy per se at all. It has to do with history and the fact that these are one-of-a-kind works of art, and they're literally being destroyed, you know, at the hands of a mob in many respects. There's not a lot of due process that takes place with that, and I was against it. Faith kept pushing the issue, and finally I just reached a point where I was like, fine, I'm blocking you. You know, when you block the woke people, they get very upset because they think they're entitled to use your social media feed to propagate their swill online. And so as time passed, you know, I thought things had passed. They got very upset at one point and reached out to Catalyst along with Herb Bias, who is a former line developer for Catalyst. Herb and Faith reached out to Catalyst and said, hey, you know, we need to pull some of Blaine's books. He's hidden secret messages about the Confederacy in his novels.
You're sure this Faith McCloskey isn't actually Tipper Gore? If you play his novels backwards, actually, you get satanic messages.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And Catalyst did a review of all the books as well as a year's worth of my social media, and they said there's nothing to this, you know, and I've got that in writing from them. That wasn't enough. When I wrote my book, Blue Dawn, which is a conservative political thriller, just the announcement of Blue Dawn.
It must be said.
Completely different publishing company, a good publishing company. And when the announcement for that book, bear in mind, book isn't out, just the announcement came out, Faith contacted another Battletech writer and threatened to have me killed. Threatened to shoot me in the fucking crotch, and better yet, I want to see him burn. So law enforcement got involved. Faith continued to contact me via my blog, postings as well as direct emails, sent threatening videos, sent other threats through hashtags, etc. The police and the judge agreed, these constitute threats in the state of Virginia under their harassment laws. I filed for a protective order, and Faith acquiesced to that. It turns out Faith wasn't a Faith at all. It was a guy in Pennsylvania living in his father's house. The bill for his internet was in his grandfather's name. He had been fired from his previous job at a big box store for issuing terroristic threats and harassment, which tells you how far a philosophy degree will take you, and that you're working in a Walmart.
Folks, I've said it many, many times. Philosophy is not a degree. It's a poster.
Yes, dead on. And so I got a protective order, and part of this whole agreement was if I would not sue him for defamation, he would stop mentioning me online.
Right.
We agreed to that, and within 48 hours, he had broken that agreement.
Of course.
And it's just not worth right now the hassle and headache to go after somebody who clearly is destitute in life, both morally and financially. So, I pretty much ignored it, moved on with my life. These people did not relent. They continued, a very small group of people who believe Faith's crazy story that, she's a lesbian nurse who's adopted 2 children. She still perpetuates that bullshit online, which is hilarious. Because who's going to let someone who's got a protective order against them and who's on parole for issuing terroristic threats adopt children? It's not going to happen.
It reminds
me. But people still amazingly buy into that BS. This person continued to harass and threaten me. When Blue Dawn came out, I talked to Catalyst and I said, look, I've been quiet for months because of my lawyer telling me to be quiet. I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I posted a blog post about it, and I said, when Blue Dawn comes out, I am going to write articles about this as an example of woke extremism. Perfectly logical. Lauren even told me, he said, if I were in your shoes, I would do the same thing. Later, he threw this back as one of the justifications for ending our relationship. But I did write a few articles, and I did several interviews about what Faith did, because it is a popular subject in our media, the cancel culture and wokeism. They proceeded then to escalate. When my last book came out in February, No Substitute for Victory, they decided to start waging a campaign, and they brought Tops and Fanatics, who are the owners of the Battletech license, into their little soiree. And Lauren's solution to this, he called me one day and said, Fanatics told me to make this go away. And the way I'm going to make it go away is...
Make it a whole lot worse.
Pardon?
Make it a whole lot worse.
Well... I don't know what was in his makeup where he thought I'd be really quiet and calm and demeaning about this. But, for some reason, he decided that the solution to this was to cancel me. And I raised a lot of issues at the time. I said, look, what's the actual problem here? And he goes, well, it's your feud with Faith. And
which they now,
said, well,
in their public statement, it must be said, they contradict this statement. Their official statement, Catalyst Game Labs, was something to the effect of, this has nothing to do with the quality of his novels, his contributions to Battletech, or his feud with any other online personalities, which I wasn't aware that assumed identities and fictitious human beings are online personalities. But anyways, so this contradicts that, and you have offered essentially your notes on a conversation, very, very circumspect taking notes on a conversation, by the way, prior to this occurrence, but you have offered basically your notes of the final conversation with Catalyst, and it explicitly contradicts that version of events, where they actually mentioned...
I'm also a true crime writer, okay? So here's the deal. When I'm on a call and somebody's telling me bad news, I'm taking good notes. And immediately after that call, I transcribed those notes because I know that this is going to come up again. So, it's an instinctive thing with me because I interview a lot of people over the phone. So, for me to keep a transcript of this, oh, yeah, I got a transcript of most of the conversation, actually, at least the key salient points.
Yeah.
I'm not making it public yet, except when they go out and completely fabricate, their version of it to fit a narrative that simply isn't true.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Catalyst lied. I'm just saying, as my boss used to put it, he was from Britain, they're being extremely economical with the truth.
Yeah. Well, they're offering the corporate speak explanation, kind of, for what's happened. Because, look, this is the problem. When you indulge cancel culture and you begin to sweep things under the rug in order to make the noise stop. I was talking with a mutual friend whose name I won't divulge. I don't want any drama centered around them, and I'm sure you don't either. But they were talking about how they are pretty sure that it was more... They were just bought by a different company, and the new company is just hearing the noise, and they don't know any of the particulars. All they know is there's noise, make it stop. Franchises should make money, not noise. Right, is kind of and this is the problem with this, is basically it becomes this ongoing effort, and you actually wind up, as you may have noticed, creating quite a bit of noise. There's quite a few people in the chat right now making plenty of noise. We will get to your questions. By the way, I asked the RazörForce community on my Discord if the mods would link that. I asked them to go ahead and offer their questions, and they did. They have some fantastic questions about just about everything, Battletech and whatever. We're not just going to talk about this situation. We're going to talk about I certainly want to talk about your book, because it's a really... it's a premise that is germane to our discussion today, but we're also going to talk about giant stompy robots, because you and I both love giant stompy robots in spite of all this. Let's not take it out on the giant stompy robots, because the current licensees happen to be a bit hapless in this case. Speaking of a mutual friend, I had another person reach out to me and ask, in light of this, what, if any, or are you even inclined toward legal recourse? Like, what do you have, and are you pursuing that? Is that even anything you can talk about? I imagine legal counsel would tell you, go ahead and shut up about that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna dive into that too much. Honestly, when it comes down to this, I'm a contract employee.
Right.
They sided with a person who threatened my life, which is outrageously stupid. Mm-hmm. They have the right to terminate those contracts. Lauren, even on the call, said, you probably have legal action against the people who complained against you. And I was like, in my mind, you're trying to deflect. Yep. You want me to go after them for you making this decision, and I let it go. It wasn't worth going into. I don't have any immediate plans. I am sure at some point I will be hearing from some attorneys yelling at me to cease and desist and stop my First Amendment rights to voice my opinion about what they've done to me. But I'm not really concerned about it. My lawyers reviewed everything, and I'm keeping above board on this. I'm not calling for any boycotts. I'm not trying to do this. I'm trying to make sure that the fan community knows exactly what happened to me, because I get asked all the time, when's your next book coming out? When's the story you said a year ago that it was done? When am I going to see it? And Catalyst promised to tell the fan community what they were going to do, and they never did it. They did a passive-aggressive approach to it and just said, well, we'll do away with Blaine, and then we're not going to tell anybody we did away with Blaine, so it never really happened. And I just don't, they've got to go do what they've got to go do. I understand they're running a business. They've made a bad decision, in my opinion. And I have a very slanted perspective on that.
Right. Understandably, I gather that you're not alone on that, from some of the feedback on my video today on this subject, the feedback on many other... I'm not the only person covering this, by the way. Shout out to Arch. Shout out to several other people who have talked about this particular issue. You know, and people have reached out again who are prominent in the community. You don't need to throw anybody under the bus. I don't want drama around anybody else, but like, you're not alone on this is the sum and substance of what I'm saying.
You know, and this involves the fan community. And I think what everybody forgets is, as a writer of Battletech, I'm a fan of Battletech. I do not want Battletech to go down the toilet as a result of this. That's why I haven't called for any boycotting or protests or whatever. But, you know, it has been interesting to watch Catalyst's response. You know, first of all, it's denial, and then they began a censorship sweep of anybody who posted anything positive on Facebook about it. They nuked the comments on those boards that they had control of. And then when polls came out, they decided, well, we're going to seed the polls with fake votes, which I saw thanks to you online. And it's amazing that it's like they think that this stuff isn't noticeable or that no one's going to say anything about it. And I feel like they're actually helping make my point about, you know, how devious this looks. And they're really not handling it well from a PR perspective, but they're also not reaching out to me. Part of that is, I'm sure this is the week before Gen Con.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're packing boxes and getting ready to go. I was real tempted to buy an extra ticket to go to Gen Con at the last minute and set up a lawn chair outside their booth. But,
tailgate, maybe. Hey, what? I can barbecue wherever I want. Worry about it.
Right. But yeah, I decided that would just not be a prudent use of my time, especially how woke Gen Con's become in the last few years too.
No kidding. I have to completely sympathize on that one. Gosh, so where to begin with all this? First off, I suppose there's a few misconceptions we should dispel. I take immediate and reflexive offense to Catalyst's statement that this is a feud between you and this fictitious fucking person. Because, and I will just speak on my behalf, like, the idea that you perpetuated any feud or caused any of this noise does not survive one viewing of that person's Twitter account. Anybody who even says they're looking forward to a book of yours, no politics even mentioned, them and what I can only assume are a bunch of sock accounts that are all themed to be defamatory towards you, all descend like vultures immediately and begin defaming and spamming and creating alt accounts in order to, and it doesn't, not just me, tons of people. Okay, so the idea that you initiated this feud, no, this person is a deeply unmedicated psychotic and continues to harass anybody who mentions you in even the most casual regards. So Catalyst can blow that one out their ass. The idea that you can, I'm sorry, I'll say that on your behalf if you're not going to. They can blow that one out their ass because they absolutely have no leg to stand on that. If you were, let's put it this way, if you were still writing Battletech novels and you had never written Blue Dawn or whatever, which I want to talk about again because the premise of it is really interesting given the current culture warp, but you know, it does not survive. If you were continuing to write just Battletech or franchise fiction and had never written that, I think they would still have an issue with you just because you're a prominent person who doesn't vote the way that they vote. And that's clear. That's clear. Because how do I know that? I'm a published writer. Hugo nominated, by the way, which I'm sure pisses off a lot of people. I'm a writer. I've never written political anything. But the fact that I have the wrong politics already rubs people in the literary community wrong, and to the point where they'll review bomb your book. They don't even care that the books that I write are just fantasy. They have nothing to do with politics. It's totally apolitical completely, right? We have witnessed the behavior of these people, is my point, for too long to continue to nourish these delusions that if you just behaved a different way, if you were just a little bit less confrontational, maybe you wouldn't bring this on yourself. No, they brought this on you. You didn't bring this on yourself. And it's fucking laughable that Catalyst would honestly try to subsist in this hallucinatory haze where that's reality, and that's what occurred here. But I just wanted to offer up that aside before we continue on. But
well, Faith has harassed you.
Yeah.
I know, and Faith has gone after several reporters who have interviewed me, has gone after podcasters who have had me on their show, has gone after other people to the point where I actually was contacted by one person who said, I need a copy of your restraining order to show my local law enforcement because this person's harassing me. Yeah. And so this person's got a fixation on me that I do not think is healthy and is very disturbing. We have protective measures in the house to deal with this person should they show because of that. And, Faith actually engaged with one person online who said, well, why don't you confront Blaine? Why don't you go slash his car tires? Why don't you, when he has a book signing, throw something at him? And Faith's response was, well, I have a protective order in place. That's the only thing preventing me from doing it. Okay, you're talking about somebody who, and I have screenshots of all of this as well. And this person has perpetuated so many lies about me out online that it's literally, it's crazed. And it's tempting to try to go through the list and go, this is a lie and this is what they did. One of them, you posted on your thing about gatekeeping people who try to bring real world politics into gaming. I posted up, these people do not bring anything positive to the hobby. That was somehow twisted as a transgender attack. And how the hell did they get from A to B? I don't know. But this is what they do. They take snippets of stuff out of context and they posted it. And it's very frustrating.
Yeah, and it's deliberate. It's completely deliberate. The enemy of the internet is context, as I've said many, many times. And the moment anything is contextualized, it's, oh, I'm against taking Confederate statues down. They don't mention that you're against taking any statues down. Ergo, you're a neo-Confederate now in their eyes. And so they are able to cultivate that utterly fictitious narrative. It's... Right. It's ridiculous, but I don't see you, for example, stumping for the Lenin statue in Seattle, Washington, to be taken down.
No.
Despite the 65 million conservatively that are estimated to have been murdered by communism in the 20th century alone, according to Princeton University. So, anyways, I want to ask if you... Well, before we actually move on, I do want to talk about Blue Dawn, because you want to talk about lies. It is a lie to claim that a book is about something when the book hasn't been released, and then a book is a certain way when it hasn't been released. And that's exactly what you faced when you started talking about your next project, which was Blue Dawn. And that was where a lot of this came to a head, from what I understand. Talk about, first off, the conception of the novel Blue Dawn and like the reaction to that and exactly what happened there.
Yeah, I don't understand why they get so mad about it, because the book really is about the violent progressive overthrow of the United States government and them establishing a progressive utopia. I've given the progressives everything that they want. They got their Green New Deal phase 1 through 5. They get social quarantine camps to lock up conservatives. They get a Truth Reconciliation Committee, which is, the equivalent of the Disinformation Governance Board. My publisher cracks up every time I'm ahead of the curve with this stuff. And they're like, you had your book out and now Biden's running with the same thing. They're kind of creeped out a little bit. And I'm like, well, I'm channeling my inner Nostradamus to pull that crap off.
I was going to say.
But it's a piece of fiction. It's an alternate history book. And it's about them taking, a progressive overthrow of the government. And what would that look like? And the people who rise up against that. And it's really that simple. And the whole series is about the next American Civil War that unfolds as people try to restore some semblance of normalcy. And it's a reflective look at what happens with revolutions and violent extremists when they achieve power. And if you look at the French Revolution, you get some really good models for how that operates. One of the key protagonists is based loosely on AOC. And so I have a lot of fun at the expense of the other party, but God knows they feed me perfect lines and perfect plots for this as we go. And it's a great series. I'm enjoying writing it because I don't have to answer to fact checkers. I don't have to answer to, a woke editor who's overlooking what I'm doing, etc. It's really a free rein to be able to express this. And I think conservatives like books like this because it angers them. People always say, I hate this book because I get frustrated on every page, but I love the book. Because it's a look at what the dark side is. But you have to, we don't do a good job as writers in many cases in telling the story of what it would look like if the bad guys won. So let's go down that path. And I think that's what's fun about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, if you think what he's doing with talking about this and sort of reflecting the current culture with sort of a post-apocalyptic novel, essentially, is what it is, kind of a political post-apocalypse, then I got some bad news about this fella named Orwell. Wrote a little novel back in the 40s to put the socialists of his own era on blast. 1984 is 1948, by the way. It's not a prediction. It's a satire of his own party and the modern left of his day. Blow it out your ass. But anyway, so yeah. But I can't believe it was the reactions from people who could not have read it because it wasn't out. And there wasn't even that substantial of information. There was a title and a premise was out there. There wasn't even a synopsis out yet, and they were already offended. They were already... And guys, well, before you go, the thing you have to understand is claiming something's about something you can't possibly know it is, before you can possibly know it, is a lie, by definition. They were lying in that moment, even if it wound up turning out to be true later or whatever, who knows? Like, incidentally, a lot of it didn't turn out to be true. But regardless, that is a lie, period. And that's an acknowledged lie that they were engaging in. But yeah, sorry, continue.
Well, no, they were just looking for a reason to be triggered. To your earlier point, these folks literally, I did an experiment at one point because Faith was so funny to kind of follow, because every time I posted anything online, it got twisted and this person would react. So I was like, I'm going to take a week and post nothing. And Faith still reacted. Yep. It was still spewing venom, still going nuts. And, to me, that confirmed that it didn't matter what I did, because this person was going to react no matter what I did. And that was just, it was bizarre. And I think it points to some need for heavy medication, this is one of those rare instances where I might favor a red flag law, that you're dealing with somebody who's just literally out of their gourd. And if you don't do anything, they immediately go, okay, well, he's not posting anything, and that's what this means, and they create a whole little scenario around it. These people have an axe to grind. They don't like me because of my politics. I get that. I'm vocal. I do not hide my values. I am not ashamed of my values, and I will not cower to a woke crowd. And I understand Catalyst has a business decision to make in regards, and they're like, well, this is going to cause problems. Lauren put it this way. He said, you're alienating half of my client base. And I said, so what are the sales of my book? I know my book is selling exactly what the last one did. And the rating was 4.8 on Amazon. So what's the problem? You're telling me I'm alienating your fans, but if they're buying the book, what do you care? And it was like, well, the sales don't matter. Well, then how are you measuring being alienated? Well, apparently it's, well, what I hear on social media, that must be what the trigger is. And I'm like, that's a horrible measure, as we've seen in the last 2 days. Yeah,
or as we learned in the Elon Musk acquiring Twitter situation, where Twitter literally were being obfuscatory. They would not tell anyone, okay, what's our bot count? How many actual users are on this platform? Take left, right, and center out of it. How many fake people are on this platform? We learned when, shout out to Renegade HPG if you want to watch some Battletech stuff. He does a great Battletech, apolitical channel. Don't take any of this drama over to him. He just does a great channel where he interviews. He's interviewed Blaine Pardoe several times about Battletech and does a great job. Great pillar of the Battletech community. But he did a poll just because he covers the Battletech community. Do you agree with what's happened to Blaine Lee Pardoe? And it started out, you know, it had been out for a while. Not many people had voted on it, and it was mostly support, not by much, but mostly support. But very, very few people had voted on it. Then some people like myself and others who are other members of the Battletech community, started retweeting it, and it was pretty lopsided in opposition to you being fired. It was like a bell went off. And we watched in real time as this poll, which had only been shared 30 times, folks, from Renegade HPG doesn't have that big of a Twitter account. I mean, he has thousands of followers, but, you know, not a super big Twitter account. So small, on the smaller end of a Twitter account, and a post that had only been shared 30 times went up 1,000 votes in 1 minute. Then the next minute it went up 1,000. Then the next minute it went up 1,000. And wouldn't you know it, they were all support votes. It was the funniest thing, to the point where Renegade HPG had to notice. He was like, wait a minute, this is not right. And so he literally did the poll over again. And what I think he did, I didn't realize he was doing it at the time, was he used either a third-party application or something to actually monitor bot vote, which you can't do. To actually monitor the bot activity. And he caught them in real time again, this time trying to be more subtle in the second poll, only by hundreds of votes at a time. Which, by the way, when you buy bot accounts to vote on things, it's like $100+ a pop. Someone's really mad at you. Someone's spending hundreds of dollars a pop just to skew a poll about you on Twitter. How does that make you feel? Does that warm the cockles?
A little bit. I'll be honest with you. I think it's a fairly retarded move. And, to me, it's either someone at Catalyst got this in their head that this was going to be a brilliant way to control the narrative and make it look like all the fans hated Blaine so that they could try to save some face, or it's somebody at their behest doing it, or it's one of these trolls who are like, gee, everyone's making me feel bad because I got Blaine canceled, so I'm going to make it look like everybody was on my side. Yeah, I don't play games like that. I saw the poll kind of after the fact and thought it was kind of interesting that they were playing this game to try to manipulate it. Yeah, I'm sure Catalyst will come out and say we had nothing to do with it, but I'd be curious to find out who the people were that were playing that game, because they obviously were just shelling out cash to get their desired results. Thank you, by the way, for proving my point, how corrupt and twisted the cancel culture is. That, if you're not winning, you go ahead and change the vote tally at the last minute to try to get your way to look good. Thank you very much, you crazed assholes. I insist you spend more money.
You got your own 4 a.m. ballot dump. You're in good company. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry, we call it fortification. Time magazine verbiage, folks. This is fortification. Let's go to some audience questions, because man, everybody is wanting to talk with you, because you're the man of the hour at this point. Another fantastic Battletech creator I can't recommend highly enough, Mage Leader, asks, do you have any tips for aspiring writers, particularly in regards to publishing your work? Now, this is germane to a point that I've been talking about recently, and that is not whining about the culture, but creating the culture, creating the alternate culture. The Iron Age has arrived. I've dubbed it the Iron Age. It's the new wave of creators. I don't know if you saw what's been going on with Eric July and the Rippaverse comic book, which just exploded. If Comicron was tracking comic book sales fairly right now, the Rippaverse comic right now would have outsold Amazing Spider-Man. Okay, so it's kind of a big deal. Just a little bit of a big deal. So yeah, like that kind of speaks to my point. A lot of people are looking for alternatives to publishing your work. They're looking for advice on how to start. What advice would you give for aspiring writers, and especially with regard to how they disseminate that to the masses?
Make sure you block Faith McCluskey day one on your Twitter account. Just it's going to save you some headache and some hassle, but it's not going to solve everything. Look, the key to storytelling is having great characters and telling a good narrative story. But to me, it's all about the character arcs. The early BattleTech stuff that I wrote, the focus was really on the plot. And that, if you look at the early BattleTech books and the early MechWarrior books, the focus was on the story more than the characters. And there was an evolution that kind of took place late in the 90s and early 2000s where we started to shift to making books more about the characters and their growth and development. So, the Archer Christofori character that I created, etc., I wanted to have an older character. I wanted to have somebody who had done their bit for King and Country. I wanted to have a character that then was called back or forced back into service and not wanting to go, but was forced there. And I thought to me, that's his arc. That's the story of how he evolves. And he becomes a very great military leader and does some fantastic stuff. When you get to the later Ill Clan stuff, you're going to see there's a lot of character development that took place with both the supporting characters and the main characters. And a lot of it was the mapping out we did I spent a lot of time mapping out, this is where this character is going to go in this book, and this book. And there's a progression and change that takes place. Now, some fans are going to agree with that. Some fans aren't. As a writer, you have to be true to yourself and go, what do I know about this character? My wife comes down all the time and I'm carrying on conversations by myself of multiple characters because I'm trying to get the dialogue right. And I want to make sure the characters are true to themselves and following the arcs that I have mapped out for them. And that's what I've done with the Blue Dawn series as well, is I mapped out good, strong character arcs. The stories will follow, and they're the things that help propel that character. But spend your time focusing on the character. And it's almost like playing D&D. You're going to focus on that character development first. Once you get a solid character, you can play that character really well. And that's what you're doing as a writer. I don't know if that addresses his question or not, but that's where I would start with almost anyone.
Cool. And as far as publishing your work, you obviously have a publisher or whatever, but do you have any experience in like the indie publishing field, or do you know much about the business end as far as where that's headed, and for new aspiring writers, what their options are?
Yeah, I did have an agent for a long time. I still do, but I don't use him for anything. The market's changed dramatically. I tend to, I'm at a point in my career where it's a lot easier for me because I can reach out to a publisher and go, look, I'm Blaine Pardoe. I want to write a book. And they're like, okay, let's see what you got. I can open the door. It's a lot easier for me. It's really hard to kind of judge it from a new writer perspective. I have self-published a few books because they're vanity projects just for me. I did one recently, the Democratic Playbook, for this election. And it was a humor piece. It was my first political humor piece. I came up with the idea at the last minute, and the publishers were all like, we can't get it in our cycle in time for the election. I'm like, okay, I can self-publish this. It's not a big deal. Amazon's Kindle Direct Press allows you to basically, at no charge, upload a book for print on demand and for printing. You got to find a good editor. You got to get a good cover. But, it really gives a lot of freedom to new authors to go, look, I don't have to go out and find a publisher per se. I can do this on my own. So there's a lot of options out there. I think Kindle Direct Press has ruined publishing and made it really interesting. It's, and at the same time, and I think it's empowered a whole generation of writers out there.
For those who don't know, contextually, in terms of what was going on with Catalyst before this, I mean, talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. We're not puffing up the importance of Blaine Pardoe here. I mean, you haven't really trumpeted your achievements or anything. Beyond writing a lot of the classic Battletech novels and really being in pretty much from the ground floor, I mean, you were one of the first outside writers who was approached, from what I understand. Like, we're one of the very few and the proud. You were also key to the launching of the current Battletech era, which we're now firmly ensconced in, which is the Ill Clan era. And it was basically launched with some short stories from you and a novel from two novels, ultimately, from you. and and now basically you were initially the guy who was guiding this in fiction, and now you're just gone. So for people who don't understand that, whatever, but that I just wanted to make that perfectly clear, because this is not just a Battletech writer. This is a guy who was key back in the day with, gosh, you did Exodus Road, which launched the Twilight of the Clans, and a bunch of stuff, which of course we'll talk about some of that stuff certainly in the questions. And speaking of which, little question from the Discord. Just a moment. I want to make sure I get the guy's name right. Destroyer 45, it looks like. What mech do you dislike the most?
The Charger.
The Charger?
You
play MWO, don't you?
No, yeah, I stopped playing MWO months ago. I just, it was fun, but once this stuff started in February, I shut off. I deinstalled it.
Yeah, that's something
the Charger
I wanted
was
to
always
mention.
stupid.
That's something I wanted to mention actually before you move on. One of the things that's so detestable about what happened to you is you've been someone who's been upfront about you being willing to engage with the community. You would play MWO with people. You would whatever. You would engage with the community to a degree. I don't know many Battletech, like Stackpole lives in Phoenix. I've never met him. You know what I mean? Like you engage with the community quite a bit, and they weaponize this against you. They literally, in games that you were in on MWO, they just took a screenshot where your name was there. Didn't have any proof that you said anything objectionable, that you had any untoward conduct, but, I've got a screenshot with his name on it. I was there, so therefore he must have said something bad, even though I don't have proof of it, whatever. So they're weaponizing this against you, being willing to engage with the community and actually forward the cause of Battletech online and the community. They're actually like reverse engineering this against you to wield, like what possesses a person to do that? You know what I mean? Like what?
A lack of a moral center, a lack of consciousness, a lack of any degree of, understanding of what they're really doing to the community. They believe themselves to be holy warriors. They're worse than any Blakist I ever heard of. They subscribe to this concept that what they're doing is for the betterment of everyone, and it's really just a woke. It's their woke shield that they put up that allows them and gives them the right to do whatever they want. I saw that comment and somebody said, Blaine was online and he used racial epithets. I don't even have my microphone hooked up when I play MechWarrior
like
online,
everyone else.
Unless I'm playing with somebody I know. It was a complete lie, and I looked at the guy's account, and it's created like 3 months ago, and he's got 2 followers, and I'm like, okay, this is a sock account with no picture, no background, and it's somebody who perpetuates a lie, and this is what they do. They take that. I've been a big proponent of supporting the fan community. I'm going to miss that. I don't feel I can do it at this point.
Right.
Given that Catalyst has essentially firmly planted a knife in my back and betrayed me, I don't feel I can sit there and really, help fans out, help dig up pieces of lore that they're looking for, things along those lines. I just don't have the heart for it after what Catalyst has done now to be able to do that. This has been a rough weekend, but it's also been very releasing from that perspective, because I've been able to finally just tell fans, look, I'm not trying to blow you off now. There's a reason I'm having to blow you off, and it's not me, it's what Catalyst has done. And I gave them a lot of consulting as well, because I'm a World War I historian. I've won major awards for that. I've been helping them out on the Leviathans project. I was working on Leviathan's novel for them. I gave them tons of consulting time and effort, and I feel like my loyalty was all a one-way road. It was me being loyal to them, and when the time came, they literally hung me out to dry.
Did you? I wanted to mention this. Speaking of getting hung out to dry, after you were or after they had informed you that they were no longer going to avail themselves of your services, they asked you to do pro bono work for them, for crying out loud. To write like an intro to a book.
The thing was, it came from Randall. So, and
Okay,
of all
so
the people,
it was probably well-meaning, but still.
And I actually opened with my response going, if this had come from somebody else, Randall, I'd been really pissed about it. But it was, yeah, we're coming out with a coffee table book. We want to get a quote from you about what you think about Battletech. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. You just terminated me. And now you want me to give you a quote in a book to help you propagate sales of Battletech product that I don't get to be a part of. And what I got back was, well, we're not going to pay you for it. Like, that somehow made it all better. And I was like, I think you're missing the whole point. This wasn't about money. Yeah. This was about the treatment. I let it go. I just couldn't do it. And if it had been anybody but Randall, I have nothing but respect for Randall. And I don't think he did this deliberately with malice. What I did get from my editor, John Helfers, when he got a notice from Amazon that my new book was coming out. Now, this is before the book's been released, A Most Uncivil War. He sent me an email and copied Lauren on it saying, well, I don't want Battletech connected with this drivel. And I was like, I bailed this guy out numerous times on projects. He's had no communication with me at all since this took place. Never once reached out to me and said, I'm sorry we parted ways this way. Hope we can see you again in the future. This was the only email he sent me. And it was like the fact that he copied Lauren on it and Lauren didn't weigh in and go, Blaine, I've talked to John. That's inappropriate what he said, blah, blah, blah. To me, it was like, God, you guys are spiking the ball and doing the happy dance in the end zone. That was really a tipping point moment for me, was when I got the email from John, because I was like, you're critiquing my writing. I was your best-selling author. Since they've relaunched the Battletech novel line, I was the best-selling author. Hour of the Wolf has outsold every other Battletech book. And you're telling me my work is drivel? I got news for you, man. That did not play well on Main Street.
You mentioned being a World War I historian. We got a question from Commandant on Discord. What are your thoughts on the World War I connection to the Battletech universe? Is that one of the things that drew you to the franchise to begin with? Is it something that you've tried to amplify over the years? What are your thoughts on that particular connection? Because that's one of the things I love.
I always liked the fact that it had that whole World War I balance of power, that whole, the various kingdoms, that are all weirdly interconnected. I love the politics. To be honest with you, I love the big Stompy Robot stuff a lot. And I know that sounds so childish, but that's what drew me in at first. I got to write on the first tech readout, 3025 in 1985, and it was a blast. I love the big Stompy Robots. The lore came later, and I enjoyed it, and I relished it. I really enjoyed doing the Comstar source book. I think it was a fun romp to go through the Inner Sphere from a completely different perspective. There's just been some wonderful projects I've been associated with, and I've really enjoyed doing them. They're fun, and to me, the lore always just kind of made Battletech sing, but it was the robots, man. The fact that you had these giant war machines, and I love the conversations we used to have about, well, can we camouflage them? And I'm like, what? How do you camouflage a 3-story war machine that runs 97 miles an hour?
Right.
What kind of camouflage can you? And they were like, well, we'll paint the upper part sky blue to reflect the sky, and it'll be green below. And I'm like, that's stupid. You can paint them any color you want. They're going to stand out. They're shooting at you.
You're right. And they're shooting bright green lasers. But we used to have fun
discussions like that. It was great. And I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss the camaraderie that came with that, and some of my fellow authors, I'm going to miss being able to engage with them. But I have to give them some distance now, because if they're seen associating with me, they're going to be the next target on the list.
Yeah, unfortunately. Heading into my Battletech questions, I have to ask, as I've never had the opportunity to inquire of an actual Battletech writer before, so I'd be remiss if I missed this opportunity. What did the Knights of the Inner Sphere do to deserve how the writing staff treated them? Because, Blaine, buddy, you broke my heart. I love the Knights of the Inner Sphere. Those poor bastards. I love those white and gold gods. How could you? How could you?
I didn't. I did not kill them. That was Ideal War. That was not me. You know, there's been a lot of great units that have come up over the years that have just been casually discarded. We used to have a good rule. If you were going to trash somebody's unit that they created, you had to really justify it. You had to talk to that author like, you don't have anything planned for this, right? Because I'm going to destroy them. That kind of, by the time we got through the Twilight of the Clans, a lot of that kind of camaraderie between the authors kind of disappeared. And there's a lot of things that went on behind the scenes with that kind of led to it. But, I don't know what caused everyone to go after them. House Merrick's always been a punching bag anyway. But you've got a
little something for you there. I am House Merrick to the bone. It is true pain, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm wearing my Clan Wolverine stuff here tonight.
There we go. I had a few questions already.
I had a fan out of the blue go, it's kind of interesting how your whole thing as it's unfolding kind of sounds like the whole Clan Wolverine saga. And I was like, oh, that's good. I like that.
I did want to ask more pointedly. Reading Ideal War, I actually did an audiobook of that by now Hollywood writer Christopher Kubasik, who actually I think did a pretty good job. It was a pretty underrated novel in my opinion, but I fell in love with the Knights of the Inner Sphere, and it seemed like it was a launching point for maybe an ongoing series with them. But then, Star-Lord came out. You were involved with that a little bit. You were the cleanup man on that, and that all seemed to implode from that point on. Am I right? Were there plans, and that book just so biblically sucked that they killed him dead? I actually like that book, incidentally. But what happened with that? Were there plans, or what happened there?
Star-Lord was written by a friend of Jordan Wiseman's father.
Okay.
And I cannot describe to you how horrible it was when I saw it. And I got a call from Don Eppolito, and she goes, I have an interesting job for you. You have 2 weeks to take this and turn it into a Battletech book. and I was like, a lot of the premise, you can't just in 2 weeks throw out the premise of what the book was, but I had to do clean up in aisle 4, and it was not pretty. It's sausage making. No one wants to see that. My only defense on that is if you thought you didn't like Star-Lord, you should have seen it the first time through, because I had to clean up. There was a clan warrior. The lead character was wearing spiked heels, and they had a scene where she was sprinting across a cobblestone road in spiked heels, and I was like, there is no way. This person, the author, literally was defying the laws of physics as I know them. It was a hot mess, and it was. I wish I hadn't done it, but at the time, you get asked to help out, and you roll up your sleeves and help out.
Yeah. Nick Palladino went ahead and donated. I want to thank you for that on the stream. And he said, and this actually goes to one of the points we mentioned earlier. I just tipped my toes into Battletech, or dipped my toes into Battletech, rather. Guess I'm taking my group and money and withholding it for now. Shame, but I hope they learn. We're not calling for a Battletech. I did not call for a boycott. You're not calling for a boycott. Now, I do hold to the Ayn Rand principle of don't fund people who hate you. That's immoral. But at the end of the day, I'm not calling for a boycott. I don't really care if you still enjoy Battletech. And the thing about Battletech is a lot of this stuff has already been released. There's a pretty big used market, even if you didn't want to fund Catalyst directly. There's a bunch of Battletech stuff you can get without, or even you can buy it after the fact on Amazon or whatever. So that's not a big deal. But I mean, you're not, let's say this explicitly, you are not calling for any boycott of any kind. Let's just have that.
No, I haven't. Yeah, and I've told people, you have to make your own choice about where you spend your money and how you spend it. I'm not going to tell you to boycott Battletech. I happen to love Battletech still. This did not destroy my love of Battletech. It destroyed the relationship I have with Catalyst. That's what this was about. And from my perspective, you need to make a personal choice where you spend your money, and I support it. People have been, well, I don't want to support them if they're not going to support you. If you want to support me, go buy my other books. Go buy Blue Dawn. Go buy A Most on Civil War. I've got a bunch of true crime books. Go buy those. I don't care. If you want to support me, that's fine. But boycotting Catalyst won't work because boycotts don't work in the gaming industry. These guys tend to collect everything, and they'll say that they're going to boycott it, but when the new product comes out, we all know they're going to go and throw their money after it anyway. So rather than put yourself in a position of mental angst, you do what you need to do. I'm not calling for anyone to inflict financial damage on Catalyst. That's not what I'm trying to do.
Right. And same here. I have not called for a boycott. If you like I love Battletech. I will still play Battletech. I'm not buying any new stuff from them because I'm not going to fund a company that has made very, very clear they don't consider opinions like mine acceptable. Because if you're considered extreme, then Jesus Christ, I might as well be standing on a balcony like Mussolini right now, according to them. So, whatever. But, so that's my personal opinion, though. I still have, you can see my Aerotech box and whatever. I'm still going to play Battletech privately. You're not taking Battletech from me because the community defines Battletech, not a bunch of usurpers or people who infiltrated it. Largely who come as castaways from Warhammer, which they essentially cannibalized. It's sad what happened to Warhammer and is continuing to happen to Warhammer, and it feels like this is kind of, do you kind of feel that way too, that there's a similarity here in what's happening with Battletech and what occurred a year or two ago with Warhammer?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to bring real world politics into gaming, and it doesn't belong there. Gaming's an escape. It's a social thing. We all do it for the fun of the game. We like sitting across the table and rolling dice. When you start inflicting your views of how the world should be on games, you ruin the games. And it kind of reminds me of all the people that are fleeing, California and moving to Texas, and now they're going to go screw up Texas. It's like, guys, you're not helping. If you're going to continue to carry your toxin with you, I don't think you belong. It just immediately I've seen posts about, the problem is, FASA and Catalyst and all these other groups are anti-Asian, and that's why House Lao is so small, because it should be so much bigger, because this, and there's no Indian representation, and where's the transgender state at, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, you guys you're carrying real world politics into this. I had a fan, or not a fan, a troll reach out to me and go, what characters have you written that are trans, and which ones how many are you going to have in upcoming novels? And this was about 6 months ago. And I told my wife, I said, this is just a trap, because I said, first of all, I'm not going to respond. But I'm like, it's interesting that they think by the 32nd century, this is still going to be an issue. Right. And, they're still thinking that this is something that defines characters and things along those lines. And it's like, that has nothing to do with anything. You don't know if any of my characters are gay or trans, because I don't make a big deal about it. You know why? Because it's not central to who they are as a character.
I want to talk about that. Speaking of your characters, I and many other fans are, worried and suspecting strongly that the next step here is to whitewash your contributions to Battletech from the record, which, make them no longer available, whether that means revising your work or just not making it available any longer, whatever. Is that a suspicion that you nourish as well?
My wife and I talked about this when I wrote Blue Dawn. She said, this is probably at some point going to cost you Battletech, and I thought she was crazy at the time. She was totally 100% right. It will not surprise me if they pull my books down. It will not surprise me if they go through and change books to make them more progressive. That would not surprise me. And some of that is based on my experience with the editorial staff at Catalyst. They're very woke, for lack of better words. And it's sad, but that's the reality of it. It would not shock me if they did that. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe things are not as bad as I think they are, but they certainly felt that way for the last few months.
And understand the import of that, guys. Anybody watching this, understand whitewashing his stuff is not just, okay, we're losing a Klan novel, we're losing this thing, we're losing that thing, we're losing this particular faction, Highlander's Gambit no longer exists, blah, blah, blah. It's not just that. You're like the only writer who went out of his way. They did Kickstarters, right, to canonize. You could have your character canonized in the Battletech universe, and you were like the only writer who actually went out of his way to, okay, here's the fans, here's their names, I'm going to make them a character in the novels. They are now officially a part of Battletech. If they genuinely went out of their way to remove your bibliography, they would actually, literally, be removing a sizable portion of the fan base who paid to have themselves inserted into the Battletech canon. Just so people understand the context.
Maybe that'll save a book or two, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what Catalyst's plans are, and I think any questions like that you guys should address directly to Catalyst if they're planning to do that. I don't know. I can only speculate. They seem to be fairly bitter about this breakup that they caused. Which I don't fully understand, their kind of perspective on that. But I don't know if they'll do that. I agree. I was upset. I saw somebody posted online today that they said, oh, well, he deliberately misnamed or misgendered a character, that who was a transgender person in a book. And it cracked me up because I'm like, you really think I looked up every individual person? I've included several hundred of these people in these books. You think I looked up their Facebook accounts and tried to figure out what their sexual identities were, right, and then deliberately went through and changed something to be hurtful or harmful? It's just wild. So, I don't know what the future holds for the body of work that I did. I would hope, Catalyst would keep it in production, but, they may have their hand yet forced again by Topps. So we don't know.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to get to the point of. Somebody asked, that, Catalyst had defended you in the past, or at least not moved against you. Lieutenant Dude asked this on Discord, by the way, shout out. Catalyst defended you last time when the stalker pulled this crap. Do you think it was directly tied to the change in leadership? Of course, for those who don't know, Topps, the parent company of Battletech, were recently purchased by a different company because they lost the baseball license, which is a pretty terrible circumstance when you're basically a baseball card company. Topps lost that. It hurt them financially, and they were purchased shortly thereafter by a company called Fanatics. Do you think that's what this was? What happened? Was it a leadership change? What changed between their initial response, which was, oh, it's just a fucking stalker, fuck them, to this response, throwing you literally under the bus?
Well, you got to remember their initial response was to give Faith an opportunity to have an article published.
That is true.
They were not supportive of me, and I actually reached out to John when he made that decision, and I said, you're out of your gourd. This person is a crazy stalker. I said, I have plenty of screenshots to show you that this person is unhinged. And what he told me was, Blaine, Battletech is a sausage fest. We need a woman's perspective on all of this stuff. and it cracked me up.
And you still need one.
I kept waiting for an apology from him on that, after the real facts came out, and it never really was forthcoming. and even during this, when everything was made public, when I said to everybody, this is actually who this person is and what they're doing, Lauren, this person had signed their contract illegally using the name Faith McCloskey. All they had to do at that point was pull that person's story out of shrapnel. That's all they had to do. Yeah. And I told Lauren, I said, if you support me and the fact that this person's threatened my life, you pull that out of there. And then this person's basically no longer a contributor to Battletech. Lauren refused to do that. So to say that Lauren and Catalyst was supportive of me during the first wave of this, they never made a single public statement once to say that they were in support of me or that they were against people threatening the lives of their most productive and best-selling authors. They did not do that. So having said that, what I was told was that Fanatics told Catalyst to make this go away. This was the decision of Lauren to do this. I don't know if I believe that, okay? To be honest with you, and that's me personally. I don't know if Lauren made them out to be the bad guys or whether they weren't. I was told that Topps had zero problems with me and what was going on. They understood the situation. Everybody seemed to point the fingers at Fanatics. I don't know if that was the case or not because I never talked to anybody from Topps about this. I only got my information from Lauren, and I don't trust that information at this point. So that's just, and that's my personal opinion. I'm not trying to bash anybody or anything else. I'm just saying I don't know what I truly believe in this situation.
Right. Mayor McNasty, thank you for the $5 super chat, and he asks, and he says, for what it's worth, it seems like the entire community is rallied behind Mr. Pardoe, and that gives me hope, at least outside of Reddit. I wish you the best, Mr. Pardoe, is what he says.
Thank you.
Just a simple, well, you've got a lot of those, by the way. Plenty of support.
Thank you.
Both in the chat and in the questions that people are asking. Let's see here. This is actually an interesting question. Crusader Saracen, a regular fan and viewer of our streams, asks, do you think Catalyst Game Labs are true believer ideologues or just kind of contemptible yellow bellies? God be with both of you gents, he says.
Well, I don't know what to believe. I think that they are left-leaning. I definitely saw in the editorial department a lot of woke practices and woke-isms that were emerging. I don't think they were right, and I spoke out against those because I thought they were wrong. It's sad that I have to feel that way, but in looking back at it now, I definitely see that there's some left leaning there, and I think that they're literally going, we don't really care if we kind of upset our conservative audience as much as if we upset the liberal audience, because the liberal audience has that far left wing that is very vocal, and even though they're an incredibly tiny minority, they're loud, and that doesn't make them right. It just makes them really loud.
Right.
So I don't really know.
It's a good what? Surely you jest. A company based out of Seattle being woke? No, come on. I don't know what you're talking about. Jesus. By the way, I mean, like, what do they literally pat people down when they enter Seattle and, oh, sorry, you can only vote one way? Sorry. And they all consider themselves original thinkers, by the way. They all consider themselves deeply, deeply intellectual at the same time. They all file into the same building. They're assigned a party affiliation and a haircut and a beard style, apparently. Anyways, so here's your skinny jeans. Anyway, so Asmagan, thank you for the 100, sir. And he says, as a Warhammer 40K hobbyist of 10 years, you poor bastard, I'm done with this infectious plague affecting our hobbies. No more. Let them get a taste of men whose patience they have brazenly spent. That was a little Shakespearean. You should have written that in pentameter. I don't know what's going on there. Let's see here. Ballistic Zero says a simple Highlander's Gambit is his favorite.
Oh, great.
Fine
novel.
By the way, there was a question, and I apologize. I can't remember who had asked it on the Discord, but they asked just as simple, what was your favorite novel that you were involved with in your time working for FOSSA and Catalyst?
Wow, it's really going to fall down to two that I go back and forth depending on. I think Betrayal of Ideals, which is the story of Clan Wolverine. I pissed off a lot of fans with that because they were all screaming retcon, but it was the absolute perfect retcon. It was telling this story from a completely different perspective. I had people telling me, you don't know anything about Nicholas Karinsky. I'm like, you asshat. I wrote the Clan Wolf source book, that section on Nicholas Karinsky. Stop telling me about what I know about Nicholas Karinsky. I wrote that he had brain issues, for Christ's sake. I loved Betrayal of Ideals because it really challenged the notion that the clans were this, Spartan utopia. And it's like, no, they were completely backstabbing and willing to cut off their right arm, literally, to make a point. I really enjoyed doing Forever Faithful. Of all the books, I always felt Mike shortchanged Trent, when he just whacked him off, in the book. And it was really insulting because we had spent all this time developing Trent as a character and developing Trent as this great trader who was the last noble, smoke jaguar of the pack. And then it was like, I just go kill him, and Victor wasn't going to have him involved. And I always felt that shortchanged him. So to be able to go back to that storyline and pick it up, right after that event, literally, and carry the story forward into the Dark Ages, etc., was an absolute blast because the character dynamics were so cool. You had Paul Moon, who was always the bad guy, becomes the good guy, and Trent becomes a really good guy. And it's like they become the core of what becomes the Fidelis and eventually what will become the Smoke Jaguars in the new Ill Clan era.
Right.
To me, I love those two.
That's awesome. And that's a great novel. Zero says to Blaine, I suffered similar problems from a stalker to what you did, but unfortunately my tormentor was protected by a powerful union. That is not an uncommon story. You have my sympathy and support. I'll look into more books. So just a gesture of support. And another one, Pope Metallicus the First says, just wanted to say I'm a big fan of both you and Battletech. Won't be the same without you, Blaine. No guts! I think he says gust, actually. No gust, no galaxy. It's a firm anti-tornado message, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a typo. No guts, no goddamn galaxy. So, Legion of Myth. If we let them redefine language, they control the discussion. If we let them remove history, they control the future. Stand up against them. And of course, we are as well as you are. You have at least taken a moment to pat yourself on the back, but allow me to do it for you anyways, for not kowtowing to the cancel culture and just following in line and shutting up. Because it would have been so easy for you to keep these lucrative writing gigs to just shut up, play by the rules, vote. Let's put it this way. I actually, there was a podcast appearance I did with Clifford Duncan, an actor, that just came out today, actually, if you guys want to check that out after this is over. But we talked about Hollywood and whatnot, and he, of course, used to be in Hollywood, was involved in some productions, and now they found out he's not quite woke enough, so he's had to move on his merry way, right? And we were talking about how in Hollywood, it's almost like a shorthand. There are absolutely conservatives in Hollywood, or at bare minimum, non-liberals. But you get to be able to recognize when you don't know somebody's politics in Hollywood, usually means they're conservative. Usually means they're either conservative or they don't fit the proper political mode. It would have been easy for you to do that. There are a lot of writers who do that. I have to say, I commend you for doing that.
I own my own shit. Okay, here's the deal. I totally 100% do. I'm unabashed about it. I'm going to voice my opinions. My political views are not radical views. You can look them up online. Go read the articles that I've written for mainstream conservative websites. Go ahead and read them. I don't care. If you don't like them, I don't care. That's on you, not me. I believe I have the right in this country to voice my opinion. Catalyst had a right to determine who works for them and who doesn't. They've made a choice, and they did it based on the politics. And I say that with complete confidence because a number of their left-leaning authors and artists who post way more offensive things than I ever have been accused of were not let go.
Yeah, I found out I was blocked by several of them without a single interaction in the course of doing research from my last video. Some, artists and writers for Catalyst, and I won't put them on blast here or try and brigade them or whatever. That isn't necessary, but it's like not a single interaction. And for years, all I had done is try to shepherd people into the hobby, and it's not like my Battletech videos are wildly political. I did a video in 2015 that was Welcome to Battletech. There was no politics in it at all. None. Absolutely none. And that converted a lot of people to the hobby, which I'm really, really happy about. Apparently that was offensive enough to preemptively block me, or they might just be part of the woke mob that use the old block lists, which is I still don't get.
It's very interesting how these guys operate. And I own my own crap. So, I could have been quiet. I could have not voiced my opinion, or I could have voiced a lie and voiced opinions that I don't really believe in. I could have done all these things, and this still would have happened. These people disliked me for whatever their reasons are. And I don't know if it's jealousy. I don't know if it's redistribution of wealth. Gee, Blaine's successful. I should be successful. So if I take Blaine down, that somehow makes me a better person. I don't know what their weird reasoning is. I have to be true to myself. And I'm not going to apologize for what I've ever written or said. I'm not going to apologize for any of my books. I'm not going to backtrack. I'm not going to go through and nuke things so that I can craft a narrative. And I own my own stuff. And this was the price for voicing my opinion, was that after 37 years, I'm being cut loose. That's okay. I will move on. I am keeping very busy doing other projects for publishing companies that really don't care what my politics are.
Good. One DWKJR, maybe work on a new username, buddy, says, okay, Dixie monuments or whatever, but let's ask the real question. What are Mr. Pardoe's thoughts on 300 plus years of Davian aggression?
The war crimes that House Davian has committed in the name of peace are things that all of us should be ashamed of in Battletech. The man started a war at a wedding, for Christ's sake. There's no way you bail yourself out of that shit.
I love it. Let's see here. Elijah Herstall, Razor, regardless, thank you for getting me interested in Battletech. Mr. Pardoe, thanks for your hard work. We are mech warriors, not Catalyst. And it is true, the community does define it. The Catalyst, though they are the copyright holders, are not necessarily the holders of the community. So, you are free to continue to play Battletech. You just don't necessarily have to support Catalyst if you don't feel morally that you should. Stephen Nizek, have any of the other Battletech authors, and he drops some names, I won't pull them into it, but, any of the other Battletech authors said anything on this topic? If there's any lesson we've learned from cancel culture, it doesn't end with one person. If Pardoe can be canceled, other authors can. And he makes a very, very good point there. So yeah.
I have to be very careful how I answer this because I don't want to get anybody
Exactly.
sucked
That's
into
why
the
I
vortex.
didn't mention. He mentioned an author by name, a very prominent one. I didn't want to pull him in and get him in shit. But yeah, have other BattleTech authors said anything on this topic to you?
I have had people associated both with Catalyst and in the writing community reach out to me and have been supportive. I have heard that others have joined the mob in towing the company line, and that's fine too. You know, at least I now know who I can trust and who I can't. And that's okay. Everybody has to make a choice whether they're going to fall on the side of, freedom or the side of the woke mob. There's other fringe players. George Ladeau made some comments about, a guy who reads books for a living. Made some horrible comments about, well, this couldn't happen to a nicer person or something along those lines. I really don't care what he thinks, considering he makes his living off guys like me. He's going to find himself at some point, not working.
This is another thing is you have to understand, and I tried to make this plea in my video. I'm sure it fell on a lot of deaf ears, if anyone at Catalyst even saw it, but it's once you placate the woke mob, you cannot be naive enough to believe that's where it ends. They are officially your editor at that point. You are never going to have any creative thought or direction at your company that you can actually credit to yourself, because the ultimate arbiter of your editorial direction at that point is the angry mob, the collective. Once you start marching down that path, that's just how it is. And I can't believe that in 2022, having watched so many people try to feed the crocodile, hoping it will devour them last, in the words of Winston Churchill, I can't believe people are still making this error. It just blows my mind.
Well, yeah, and I had a similar discussion when I was told this by Laura. I said, you're literally putting them in charge of your editorial process. They're going to determine what gets said. And I said, this will not stop with me. They will go after the next target. And that's going to happen. And I don't want to drag other authors through what I've been through by any means. But I guarantee you that while they're chortling tonight thinking somehow they've won some great victory for Battletech and getting me ejected, they really haven't won anything, because I'm still out here and I don't have to be quiet about what they've done. I don't have to, and I won't be quiet about what they've done.
Yeah. Let's see here. Ronnie Lee says, I can't believe people are calling you transphobic and Catalyst employees are behind them. They have only kicked the hornet's nest. We will fight for our George Lucas. You're the George Lucas now. Oh, goodness gracious.
Oh, God.
Just somebody clip that. You're George Lucas. Oh, God.
What did I do to deserve that? This whole transphobic thing is a big. They're basing it off the fact that I responded to one of your posts, for God's sake, and all I was saying was, I don't think these people bring anything to the community. I wasn't talking about trans people at all. I was talking about people trying to bring real world politics into gaming, and that's where I was. And I saw it repurposed and repackaged as a complete fabrication that I was somehow a transphobe. I find that offensive on a lot of levels. I have very close relatives who are in the gay community, etc. And I just, the thought that I am in any way bashing them, my son is gay, for Christ's sake, so to say that I'm going after the LGBTQ community is just bullshit on a stick.
Hey, hold on a second. I think we've got a nice one from someone we all know. The Archcast goes ahead and thank you for weighing in. Says, stay strong, Blaine, and thanks for bringing him on, Razor. I'll do my video on this tomorrow. And on a side note, If you were in fact a contract employee, you have at least a wrongful termination lawsuit as a possibility. Now, you were an independent, correct? You were like, yeah. So that's I doubt that would apply in this case. They do the old WWE independent contractor smokescreen thing.
Yeah, Catalyst is perfectly entitled to hire and fire, hire and people that they want. But what it is it's censorship at the source. They're only going to hire people that have a right or left-wing leaning view.
Yeah.
As the last conservative that was, I think this is a lesson for anybody there that is conservative to not voice their opinions or let anyone know who they are or what they believe. Because they're going to look at me as the model for this.
Yeah.
And it's censorship at the source. Now, I don't, my books are all fiction. I don't have hidden messages in the books. I don't put in the fiction that I write anything that's not either blatant or there's nothing hidden in there, or I'm not pushing a conservative agenda or anything else. I'm just telling really good stories about really great characters. And, the concept that somehow that's wrong. I think and they're going to prevent people that even have that other perspective working there is something Catalyst is going to have to come to terms with. They're going to have to deal with it, and they're going to have to address it with their fan community.
And in support of what you're saying here, I remember vividly I forget if it was a full panel with other Battletech writers and creators, or if it was just the interview with you on Renegade HPG. But there was a question from the fans about does the real world and this was years ago before any of this controversy emerged. Does any real world politics enter into the fray? And you specifically replied, no, we might use history as a model, whatever, but explicit politics are verboten in Battletech, and we don't put them in. It's literally like almost an unspoken editorial direction kind of a thing. So, and this was, again, years before any of this was before, I'm pretty sure it was before even Trump was president. It was a whole thing, and it was years ago, long before this schism ever took place.
We don't do that because first of all, it's tacky and everyone sees through it. Battletech fiction isn't highbrow science fiction. It's beer and pretzels science fiction. And people are going to see through that stuff pretty quick. It's just not worth doing, I don't think. To me, just go ahead and tell good stories about classic situations that characters find themselves in, and the fans will enjoy that. I feel terrible that the fans there's a whole bunch of fiction that I had done that had gone through editorial and was waiting for release. I had books that I was working on that are never going to see the light of day at this point. And I feel terrible about that because I think the fans are going to want to see that stuff, and they're going to hire other people to do it. And I don't know if those people are going to be qualified or skilled enough to actually handle the characters and the situations correctly.
Yeah, that's a shame. And you got to believe that person will be minding their P's and Q's, and that makes a writer restrictive. That makes a writer clam up a little bit and a little bit less free in the writing process, I would imagine. Right. Speaking only for myself as a, barely a writer.
Let's you're see. A writer.
I have written words.
You're a writer. I'm sorry. Welcome to the party, pal.
Unfortunately. Welcome. Now the albatross is around my neck. Let's see here. STT. This is some good news for you. I just picked up Blue Dawn from Amazon. You do you, Blaine.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to go down and do a lot of stuff that I want to do and not have to look over my shoulder about this woke mob.
Yeah. And to that point, Blast Radius says what Blaine is talking about in his new book, he's referring to Blue Dawn, is exactly what Marxist progressives are aiming for at neck-breaking speed. I don't know why they're mad about getting their way.
I call it a conservative political thriller, and I do that just out of courtesy to my liberal friends because I'm like, look, if you're liberal, you're not going to probably enjoy where this book goes. It's a political thriller. It's an alternate history book. It's fiction. And my wife stresses this every time we have this discussion. She goes, "Why are these people so upset over fiction?" It's not like you wrote and said, "This is what's going to happen." It is clearly a work of fiction. But the woke mob can't distinguish between reality and fantasy at all. To them, it's all the same. And their emotions are equated to facts. So they think if they are upset about it, that's an important fact.
Right. And now we get into the really controversial stuff. Forget the culture war. Forget any of this. Forget cancel culture. Fucking getting whatever. Brett Verdesheim, I gather. Here we go. Centered. What's your go-to mech of choice? GHR5H, a grasshopper pilot here, you freaking meta player, you bastard. What's your go-to mech of choice? Go ahead. That's what he says.
It's an Atlas. I'm sorry.
I was calling him a meta player. You're... No,
I go with an Atlas so that I can stay in the game a little bit.
No, I'm a Mauler player personally. I'm one
well,
of those
if I do the mech pods, which I love to do the mech pods when I'm at Gen Con, I'm in a Mauler every single time.
Yes.
Every single time, because that's my go-to mech in the mech pods. Absolutely 100% pure. I love the Atlas, and from a clan perspective, I really love the Warhawk, the Masakari. I love that mech. It's got a cool look to it. I think the resculpts they've done on it are fantastic. Anthony Scroggin and his team just knocked it out of the park. It's sexy, and if you can say that about a mech. The Atlas has no sex to it. It's just a blunt object. But there's something cool about that skull-like cockpit. I just can't. I'm sorry. I just enjoy that a lot.
Dude, the Atlas is... I still remember that mission in Mech Warrior 4 Vengeance, which I like a little better than Mercenaries. I always have liked it a little better than Mercenaries. But in that particular game, there's that mission where basically you get a full lance of Atlases and you're just steamrolling through a city. And you're just walking through buildings. And, like, it's exactly what you wanted out of a Battletech game. It's freaking fantastic. There's something about being in an Atlas. It used to be my favorite mech, but when I found the Mauler, it was just, the DACA. I need the DACA. The DACA is needed. But regardless, the Grizzly says you can play Battletech without supporting Catalyst Game Labs if you like. He suggests getting minis off eBay or Death Ray Designs. He says it pains him that this happened, but being a Warhammer fan, he did predict some sort of cancel coming at some point. Let's see here. Oh, this is kind of interesting. Count of Arcadia. Mr. Pardo, is there any reason that none of the leaders in the Inner Sphere have kids when they're getting around 50 years old? This has me concerned that the Inner Sphere dynasties are being nuked.
You know, we actually, at the last Battletech Summit, had this huge discussion of trying to figure out what kids existed and where. And it gets real fuzzy when you get over to the Combine, because there's so much shit. Between the Combine and House Merrick, trying to figure out who's got legitimacy to the throne is a fascinating thing to go through. And at the time, I remember saying, you know, what we really need is to put together a good genealogy, and actually you could sell it as a product to go like, here's the actual family trees, so that the fans could keep it sorted out. But it's confusing as hell. I have no idea why we don't have some younger people that are in there in that mix. And we're seeing the rise of some of that. You know, we've got a new ruler in the Free Worlds League that I think has some actual potential for the first time. I think Trillian Steiner is a really cool character, and I like her, and I think that's good. I think the Combine's always a hot frickin' mess and will remain a hot frickin' mess. And I took care of a lot of our Jade Falcon bloodlines, so got that resolved.
Garant says, hold on now, the charger with all small lasers was fun in multiplayer Battletech on Kesmai. I can confirm, although I ran Catapult exclusively on that game. You could charge, knock down, and small laser them to death. Oh, the hatred. Dude.
Yeah, I'm strictly talking tabletop when we're talking the charger. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It was one of those things when I saw the design, I'm like, was somebody drunk when they did this?
You know what Mech does that for me? Design-wise, visual design-wise. The Huron Warrior. What in the world were they?
That was one of mine.
What were they thinking? Tell me what you were thinking. Me.
That was 100% me.
I want to hear this. Because, dude, this is legendary, by the way, on the RazörForce. Every time somebody asks me, what is the weirdest looking mech you've ever seen? The answer is Huron Warrior. You have got to... What in the... He's wearing a headdress? What is going on?
I love that look. It's a cool look. It's different. I always said this was part of the problem of the old Renegade Legion line was we had tanks that were different, but they looked like all the other tanks. At least in Battletech, you had to have something that looked distinctive. And coming from Michigan and having such close associations with the various tribes of Indians in Michigan, both from a college perspective and from where I lived perspective, I really wanted to pay homage to the Hurons. And I have a lot of respect for the Huron tribe as well as the Chippewa tribe especially. And I was like, let's just bend the rule a little bit. When we talk about what the thing looks like, we're going to give it a headdress. It's going to look weird, but it'll be distinctive. And people are going to see it, and they're going to know what that mech is. There's so many mechs, and I think your fans will probably agree with this. There's some mechs that when people post pictures of them, they're like, what mech is this? And you'll get 6 different answers because they all kind of look the same.
Yeah. It's like
the Huron Warrior doesn't look like anything.
Yep. Is that a locust or a flea? Is that you know what I mean? Like you get a lot of that. Oh, it's another cockpit with long legs.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. And the Michigan area connection I had never put together before. I had no idea. But that's interesting to find out. But yeah,
well,
that is my go-to for what is the weirdest battle mech that in existence. I'm like, the Huron Warrior is the first.
Oh, well, yeah, I'll take the bullet on that one. That's me. I did that. My bad.
Well, you bastard. Let's see here. Ronnie Lee, there are literally just 5 people in the hashtag Battletech Twitter tag giving us a bad name. RazörForce, let's show them how wrong they are. By all means, shout out the stream because we're talking all things Battletech and what Blaine Pardoe is going to be doing next after his ignominious cancellation. Mage Leader with another hot take. Classic or Alpha Strike?
Yes. It depends. Yeah, I will say this. I love Classic, but I've often said Battletech's a game where you spend 8 hours fighting a 2-minute battle. Yeah. It's if you're doing like small numbers, and I'm talking lance against lance, I'm 100% in Classic. If you want to actually have a large-scale battle, you've got to go Alpha Strike. I think Alpha Strike's a very nice system. It's also a great system. My grandson turns 13 this week, but I started him on Alpha Strike, and it's an easier transition to get younger players in, to get them started on Alpha Strike, and then migrate them to the Classic.
Yeah. I like that there's different levels like that, and now there's even more with the beginner box set has like almost Alpha Strike rules, sort of like in between rules, which I think is a good way to go. I think it lowers the bar for entry. Whatever issues we might have with Catalyst at present over their current editorial direction, I think the beginner box set and the Game of Armored Combat relaunches and whatever, I think they were handled pretty well in the overall. Personally, I do like the previous, what was it, the 30th anniversary edition or the 35th? I got it behind me. The big with the Atlas getting blasted from all directions. That box set from several years ago. I love how much stuff comes in that one. But
a lot of that credit goes to Brent Evans, who was the line developer at the time when we went back to the box set and, you know, up through the Kickstarter and the launch of the Ill Clan era. And Brent really has a great eye on for Catalyst on what's needed and how to structure it. Randall has a lot of influence on that too, and those guys are, the two of them really do a good job. I think they've got a good finger on the pulse. I've seen some nice stuff coming out. I think the Alpha Strike box really looks interesting. You know, I think it's good that they're finally kind of giving Alpha Strike some legs, you know, to be able to stand on. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out, you know.
Cool. Let's see here. And this is an interesting question that I think a lot of people have. Beggar Hero, would there be any other sci-fi universes you would like to write in or find yourself amenable to writing in? Or are you just mercenary, anyone that pays?
I'm picky because I have time, and I work full-time as a writer, so I get to pick and choose what I work on.
Right.
One of my favorite sci-fi universes, there's probably zero chance of writing it, is David Weber's the whole Honor Harrington line. I absolutely love those books. They are nauseating in their level of technical detail, and for some reason I enjoy that. It's well done. The politics are very interesting. I really enjoy those. I've been following Rick Partlow, I think his name is, his Drop Zone stuff. I've started those, and I've really enjoyed them for armored suit combat. I just think they're just fun. You know, there's so much good military sci-fi out there that there's a lot of places I would love to be able to write in. And now I'm going to have a little bit more opportunity to explore those. And plus, you know, Brent and I have kicked off Creative Juggernaut, and we're doing our own Kickstarter, and we have 3 novels done and in the can and ready to be kickstarted out the door starting this fall. And so we're going to be doing our own universe with mechs. And so I even got one of the miniatures right here. I'll show you. This is one of the mechs for our game system.
Nice.
So, you know, there's a lot of fun stuff. And, you know, I'm not limited to Battletech by any means. Battletech was a passion project. It didn't pay a lot of money. And the last couple of years, there's been a lot of weird hassle associated with it, especially with this online stalker thing that didn't make it worthwhile anyway. But for me, it was something I loved because I loved the universe. And I'm going to miss not being a part of that. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I don't get to write fun blow-up mech stompy stories. So.
Right. Okay. Alejandro Munoz says, this is really inspiring. Currently writing a fantasy novel about lizard people that pray and make cool magic happen. Our political class? Your success motivates me to kick my ass to get back to it now.
Good.
Let's see here.
Get right.
This, in connection with that, Shiwan Khan asks, do you think someone can be too old to start writing and be published?
Hell no. I think there's a lot of age discrimination in our country in general. I hear it all the time. People are like, yeah, okay, boomer. And I'm like, for a bunch of people who get triggered by everything, you're really quick to label age discrimination and not have an issue with it. Yeah. It boils down to, I don't think you're limited at all by your age. I think if anything, you may bring a lot more to the table, and you're definitely going to bring some different perspectives. The writer I was when I was 30 years old is very different than the writer I am today. And it's not just the amount of experience I've had, it's the number of books that I've actually read that have enhanced who I am. If you're going to be a writer, you got to be a good reader. And I've learned a lot through a lot of the reading I've done. Right.
Wrecked the Hull, thank you for the 50, and asks, question for Razorfist and Blaine. And this is kind of in a creative connection. He's creating a sci-fi tabletop RPG, but he's struggling to figure out a cool and easily remembered name. Any advice?
Right. It's a weird place to be stuck.
I know, that's the problem. I guess if I could offer my opinion, it's that a lot of sci-fi universes and comics and whatever, things that don't take off, have an overly complicated name. Like, you know, it's the Chronicles of Glandalf or whatever. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. No. Do something simple, one word, iconic, something that has a sci-fi content. Like, I think Bethesda, whatever you think of the game, I don't know how the game's going to turn out, but Starfield is a really good name for a sci-fi thing because it sounds like a sci-fi thing and it's easy to remember. Something like Stratosphere, something, you know, something that has a sci-fi spacefaring connotation, you know what I mean, but isn't too complicated, I think, or too esoteric. That'd be my advice. What about you?
To me, I always say, think about what you want on the cover of the book or on the box of the game. And does it make sense? You know, are people going to look at it and go, okay, I'm going to pull that off the shelf? Because a lot of times what they're looking at is the narrow spine of a book on a shelf at Barnes and Noble or in a game store or whatever. It all depends on how stuff gets displayed. And so you have to have, whatever it is, has to be something concise, easy to understand. It has to be compelling enough to have somebody go, well, I want to see what that is and pull it out. They'll look at the cover, the back cover, et cetera, and get the gist of what the story or the book is or the product is. To me, everything boils down to what can you get on that spine that's going to suck someone in.
Right. Right. That's actually very, very good advice. Scott the Celt, we're getting a lot of creative questions. I don't know if you get this sense, with what's been happening with the Ripaverse and alt comics and whatever, or Alterna comics, I mean, from Ethan Van Sciver and new publishers. What I've been doing with my Night Vale series, Death Mask, by the way, the new one is available for pre-order. We're already sold out of the signed editions. There will be an animated trailer coming soon, but there's kind of a creative vibe in the air outside of the sort of traditional publishing dynamic. You know what I mean? And so this is reflected. We're getting a lot of questions in this connection today. People wanting to create their own things, and I think that's great. I'm trying to, and Scott the Celt says, I'm trying to write a steampunk high fantasy meets World War I industrial warfare sort of story. And I guess what he's asking really is for research material. Are there recommendations that you have for stuff that probably has to do with World War I would be his question. And you would be definitely the man to ask on that one.
Well, there's some absolutely fantastic stories that came out of the Great War that never really got a lot of play. You look at the Cruise of the Emden, which is an absolutely stunning story about the German ship, the Emden, and what it did. I wrote a book called Cruise of the Sea Eagle, which was about the Ziyadler and Count Felix von Luckner taking a three-masted sailing ship around the world in World War I, raiding merchant ships. And there's some very dynamic stories. And I think what you want to do is look at those from a character perspective, because they give you some of the idea of the age of adventure that really was taking place amidst all the carnage that we saw on the front lines of the war during that period. So I always say, look to those stories, look to the stories of aviators, guys that were really dynamic. You're going to get inspired by real world events and real history.
Right. That's a great, yeah, absolutely. I also love the little character story. Like, I'm obsessed with, of course, because I'm House Merrick, I'm obsessed with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the end of it as a result of World War I. Always have been. There's some great books about that. The Fall of the Double Eagle, the World War I and the end of the Habsburg monarchy. These are great. What's the author's name? Reichensteiner, something like that. Amazing Germanic name. But there's some great stuff you can read. And also, I'm obsessed with the Lusitania sinking. And there's some great books about that. Dead Wake. Lusitania, what is it? Architecture of a Tragedy or something. That was actually written, interestingly, from the German perspective of the Lusitania sinking. Very interesting. So there's some cool stuff that you can look into there from the World War I era. Gigamite, longtime fan, shout out to you, sir, asks, what are the simple question, I can't believe we haven't asked it yet, what are your plans next after all of this nonsense?
You know, I'm working on book 5 of the Blue Dawn series right now. I'm already way out on those. I want to get that book done. I've got a true crime book that my daughter and I are working on about a murder that took place, or a double murder that took place here in Virginia in the 1960s. That resulted in a deathbed confession that's absolutely fascinating. I got the case file sitting here on my desk. So that's going to be a blast to do. It's been a while since I've done a true crime with my daughter, and her and I are the only father-daughter duo writing true crime. So we're both really kind of looking forward to crawling through that. And beyond that, you know, the land and sea stuff, I've got a number of short stories that are going to get pulled together into an anthology that'll come out after we get the Kickstarters to launch the initial trilogy. So I've got so many projects going right now. It's really keeping me busy.
And a good place to find that is, I believe is it Blaine Pardoe, just blainepardoe.wordpress.com, or I believe you also have a main website as well where a lot of news is posted.
Yeah, I got a blainepardoe.com. I don't go there very often, but you know, there's no way to do dialogue there. I always encourage people, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook. You know, I'm pretty open, as long as I will say I've become a little more discerning the last couple of days. I've had a lot of people reaching out to me, and there's clearly some crazy people that are trying to, you know, latch on and weigh in. So, you know, there's some people I've just blocked right off the bat. You know, they sent a friend request, and I'm like, okay, not only am I not friending you, I don't even want you to look at what I'm doing. What? You know, because they're clearly coming with an agenda if you look at their profile, and I don't, you know, I've got a stalker of my own. You know, I don't need new ones.
Right, exactly. It's like Friends after age 30. You've got your group, you're set with that, you're not holding auditions. That's it.
Yeah.
Samuel Steingard, speaking of what you're doing, how about who you're doing? Who would be a better wife, a clan elemental or a canopus cat girl?
I hate cats. So I'm going to go with the clan elemental.
Sorry, say that again. Your mic was a little low.
Oh, I hate cats. I'm going to go with the clan elemental.
Clan elemental? Okay, gotcha.
Hands down. I have no use for cats. Last thing I want to be dealing with is a human hacking up hairballs.
Right? You don't need that big of a litter box. Let's not.
There's nothing romantic about that.
Right, exactly. Is Canopus, is that like the Kim Basinger of Battletech? Is that one of those?
Look, we've had this discussion for years. It's the whole Lyran, Davian,
Jaime, you know. Jamie. That drives me.
Yeah, I you know, and we talked about at one point, a group of writers, we talked about the need to actually define it, and we all came to the conclusion that even if we defined it, no one would actually follow what we said, even if we published it and said this is the official way that you say it. Because in the real world, people are going to put their own accent to it, etc., or their own slant to it. So you might as well just allow it.
Okay, here we go. Actually, God, there's so many questions. Thank you guys, by the way, for weighing in. We're not going to be able to get to all of these, but we appreciate all of the feedback and certainly all the questions. I would think not here, but this is still an interesting question. You know, honestly, you probably wouldn't want to throw anybody under the bus anyway, but I'll ask it all the same. Samuel Steingart, is Jordan Weissman at all aware of your firing? And if he's not in the know, is he in the know? Does he even care? Are you even aware?
I don't know. I have no idea if Jordan's in the loop, and I don't know if anyone...
He's busy making video games anyway.
Yeah, you know, I like to think I had a good relationship with him, but I haven't really talked to him in years, and I'm not going to reach out to him on something like this. You know, this was a catalyst call.
Right, exactly. Just thought I'd ask a good question from the community all the same. Let's see here. Geodes, aside from your most recent book, Blue Dawn, will we be getting a sequel along the lines of Fanatical Catalyst? Just joking. But are there any projects coming up from you we should be keeping an ear and an eye out for? Well, you kind of mentioned some of them. You've got some stuff in the Kickstarter pipeline too, right?
Yeah. The Land and Sea series, I think, is going to be really good. There's no politics in it. Of course, there wasn't in any of my other Battletech stuff either. But I think Land and Sea is fun because it's a great ensemble cast. And I love writing. This is my new thing. I like writing about ensemble casts where you have a group of people and you tell the stories from all of their different perspectives. Land and Sea is just really fun. It's 25 years in the future. It's kind of got a vibe like The Expanse in some respects. You're not 100% sure what's going on until you get pretty far down the road as to what is really happening with the story itself. Right. And it's great characters. I'm having a fun time with that. I think that's going to be a blast. I have toyed with, because I'm doing the Blue Dawn series and it's going to go out probably about 10 or 12 books. I have toyed with naming one Faithless. But I don't really want to give this idiot any more fuel to their fire or any more, they're basking in their glory anyway because they got me fired. And, so let them have their little parade. And, I have no intention of kind of dragging Catalyst through, a book or any of that. I'm not going to base
Catalyst are going to have all the problems in the world on their hands anyways, just having capitulated to this nut job, and all the idiots that are going to descend on them now thinking they can basically determine company direction because, let's be honest, they just did. Yeah. So they're going to have plenty of headaches in the future. If they think, I said it in my video, I forget what the exact quote was, but it was something like, you're not heading off a problem. You've just made a different problem permanent, really, is the problem now at this point. Sean Korsgaard, this is interesting. I happen to know this guy a little bit. He says, we should have a chat sometime, Mr. Pardoe. Your friends at Bain, B-A-E-N Books. It's a publisher. Yeah, they're actually a pretty good publisher, incidentally.
I know they are. I've actually followed some of their stuff, some of their authors. I would be happy to have a discussion. My contact information's out there. Feel free to give me a ring.
Yeah, sweet. Walrus Aurelius. And this is an interesting question because I'm actually not a big hater of this particular time period, but how much damage do you think the Battletech Jihad did to the setting?
The words I have used in private, and I've never said them out loud on a public forum, but I kind of feel completely free at this point of any burden. The words quasi-controlled clusterfuck is what or QCCF is how I've always referred to it. It was the worst managed disaster I've ever seen inflicted on Battletech. And her BS was the line manager at the time, and I know he got fired or let go or whatever during that period. He destroyed en masse large-scale units with only light coverage of what actually happened. It's a whole period that makes zero sense. Because suddenly the word of Blake goes from skimming some money off the budget to having a giant fleet that they can jump anywhere in the inner sphere and invade everywhere in the inner sphere. They never adequately explain it. They did a whole bunch of crazy ass conspiracy books that, caused more problems with the fan community, I think, than they actually created, because they created the impression that some of these things might be true and might not. And it really just fueled things to make it worse. There was no comprehensive fiction at all that came out of that period that was of any value that I've read. You didn't care about anything other than, I hope they lose. And, I kind of hope the Blakeists all die, and they do, because we've already gone to the Dark Ages and we knew what happened. Right. Some of that, I think Catalyst got handed to them. to be honest with you. When the WizKids launched the Dark Ages, they did the time leap, and the Jihad was kind of a mentioned thing of, well, that happened, and that's how we got the Republic of the Sphere, blah, 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 blah. So it suffers a little bit, I think, from the taint of the whole thing is a retcon. It was, you did a time hop and then you decide to go back and do it. I think the other problem that Catalyst and FanPro both had with it is they wallowed in it for 13 or 14 years, creating Jihad product that was, it just didn't have the uptake with the fan community. Right. And when we moved through the Dark Ages, we weren't seeing that had a taint all of its own with the fan community. That's why I think the Ill Clan era is so kind of cool, because it's like, we did to drive a stake in the heart of the Dark Age era and kind of say, look, this is new ground, we're moving forward. And I think a lot of the fans are kind of going along with that. I'm sure there's a handful that are, everybody has their own favorite era. Let's put it that way. I think that's the least desirable era out of all the Battletech stuff. There's nothing redeeming that comes out of the Jihad. Zero.
I don't hate it personally, even though I think, isn't that the era when the Knights of the Inner Sphere fucking, I think, no thanks for that one, you pricks. But that's my only gripe with it. Other than that, I didn't hate it. I'm not exactly setting games in that era, and I don't think that's a unique circumstance among Battletech players. Let's put it that way.
Who wants to play the Word of Blake?
Exactly.
Hey, I want to play a crazy military sect cult thing that, nobody wants to play them.
War Hippie, thank you for the 20, and he says, 30 years. This is a familiar sentiment among myself and many people in this chat. 30 years I have loved Battletech, and this might be the most disappointing thing that has happened. Best of luck to you, Blaine, he says.
Thank you.
And it is...
Don't let this disappoint you guys. This is my problem to bear, not yours. But I think you as fans need to know about it. Right. I'll shoulder this one.
Right. Here's a question. Although we already kind of know this because you've done some streams with him. Logan Darklighter gives a little shout out to Tex of the Black Pants Legion. He asked Blaine if he's ever listened to Tex's BPL audio series, specifically the clan stuff, and if he likes them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of the better stuff. I liked your primer on Battletech. I always enjoyed that. I thought it was good. I listened to some of your stuff on Battletech because I just like the fact that you're not burdened the way an author is burdened, by contracts and stuff like that. You get to speak how you feel because you're a fan, and that's great. I think it's wonderful. I feel the same way, about some of these other folks that you've mentioned, Arch and some of the others who have done some fantastic podcasts, and I think it's great. I absolutely love Texas stuff. The quality is fantastic. Texas voice is just... it's hypnotizing. When I went out and got the audio guy to do Blue Dawn, I auditioned like 13 guys, and my model was try to get somebody that sounded close to Tex.
Yeah. And people don't realize until you have a private conversation with him, which I've had many, that's just him. He's not doing the movie trailer voice thing. That's the dude.
No. This is how he talks, and I've had private conversations with him. I haven't had a conversation with him since all this went down because I don't, the fan community put him, the same woke mob went after him, and it was terrible what it did to him, and they really didn't care. They blew an incredibly minor thing hopelessly out of proportion. And they really made him very despondent for a while, and I felt bad for the guy. There was a couple times I called him just to make sure, are you doing okay? Because I know what they're putting you through, because I'm going through some similar stuff with my stalker, and they really raked him over the coals. He came through this just fine. I think his stuff is fantastic. I think he should be the one narrating a lot of the books for Battletech. Because I think he would just knock it out of the park.
Let's see here. Sommel to Mr. Pardoe. Blessings of Blake be with you. Launches nukes.
Ouch. What did I do to you?
I know! That's about as close to a fuck you. Like, a stalker for months and months couldn't get to him, but blessings of Blake upon you. Forget about it.
Oh
We're
my
ending the
God,
stream
that was
now.
the kill shot right there. PPC to
Cord.
the head.
None of your business says this pretty much killed his interest in the Ill Clan era, which is a shame. I've been enjoying the Ill Clan era, especially your books. I actually did a little recorded. I didn't put it up, but you know, every now and then I'll put up a Battletech audiobook, no profit, no ads on it, just not for profit. Just put it out because I wanted to get Battletech
I listened to your Ideal War one. It was good.
Thank you. Yeah, I did Ghost of Winter, the Mech Warrior book, and I did Ideal War. I recorded Rock of the Republic as an audiobook, and I haven't put it up yet. But that was the first. Was that the first of the short stories for the Ill Clan that you did, or leading up to the Ill Clan that you
Divided We Fall came first,
okay,
which was the Wolves Dragoons setup book.
I've got that
then
one too.
Rock of the Republic, then Children of Kerensky, and then Hour of the Wolf.
Yes, yes, and they're great, by the way. Hour of the Wolf is a great way to start off the era, but I like those prelude novels, even though they are a lot of setup necessarily, because you have to. That's just the nature of those stories. Anyways, he says, guess I'll forever be stuck in the post-clan invasion. Get your Battletech product while you can, folks. He says it's only going to get worse. I hope not. I hope not. I love Battletech, and that's the saddest thing about this, is they're not just firing, you know, an author or parting ways with an author and a sculptor as well. We haven't even talked about sculpting and mech design and whatnot at all, the stuff that you've done. But a fan, you know, an ardent fan of Battletech. Like you just said, it's a passion project for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's hard. I will tell you, this weekend has been hard. It's also been very rewarding. The fans have made it really easy. It hurts me when I see people put the nasty stuff up. You know, they don't think that bothers me. I try to let it roll. You know, and you sit there and go, I can't believe you're buying into this lie or series of lies or whatever. And, you know, I get it. There's a narrative that Catalyst wants to push, and they can push whatever they want. I've got transcripts of my call with Lauren, and I'll stick to what I know to be the facts. I don't have to make something up, and I'm not lobbying for anybody to dislike Battletech going forward. I think you should, if you've enjoyed Battletech, continue to enjoy Battletech. You know, and if you're displeased, well, contact Fanatics, because that's what the woke mob did.
And that's what I say. You know, don't harass, don't brigade, voice your displeasure, voice your disappointment more than anything. Voice your disappointment, make clear that you have been spending on this hobby and that your voice therefore matters, and that this is going to affect your purchasing decisions. Don't you know, don't get into insults and all that. Although, to be frank, let's be honest, the woke mob probably did exactly that when they were complaining to begin with. But if their conduct on social media is any indication, certainly they did. But you know, I have already received a lot of messages from fans. Every other comment on that video I put out today is, oh, just sent my email, just fired off my phone call, just sent some of these people are literally putting pen to paper and sending letters through snail mail.
I appreciate it. I don't think it'll change anything, but
right.
You know, and I'm not trying to, by the way. That's not my motive. Yeah. I don't know if I can go back at this point. These people have betrayed my trust and, you know, made this very personal. Yeah. They sided with someone who threatened my life. And I ask you to put yourself in my position, that if you were a figure who was contributing to a hobby as long as I have, had someone threaten your life, and then had the publisher essentially do exactly what that person wanted done, which is have you removed, and never really stood behind you on it, how would you feel if you were in my shoes? And I don't know of a lot of people who are going to go, well, I would reflect and say it was all my fault type thing, and like I said, I own my own shit. I realize I post stuff online and somebody's going to take it out of context, but what my personal politics are has nothing to do with what I've contributed to Battletech over the years.
Right. Bias is not a fact. Oh, wait. This is the only bias that really matters. This is interesting. And I should ask this question. Samuel, Battletech question. Do you think the current pool of writers have a pro-clan bias?
I would say no. I think there's been a weird obsession lately with bringing back a lot of the old units. And I think it's good to see the Grey Death Legion come back. I really do. And I think Jason's work on that has been really good, and I like it. I'm glad to see some of the old units kind of get brought back because they got slaughtered in the Jihad and it made no sense. We're seeing the Iridani light horses coming back in some guys, and I like that. I think those are really good things, but I think we got to be careful that we're not going too much. That Catalyst, it doesn't go back too much to the old well to bring back all these DOA units.
Yeah.
You got to have some new units. And I did a story on one, for Shrapnel, where we took some of the characters from Hour of the Wolf and they went out and formed a new mercenary unit and stuff. And I think we need more new mercenary units as well as the old units, because the whole concept of Battletech, I think, that has driven the fan base for years is that you could create your own unit and play it, and you weren't totally boxed in by what the houses were and everything else. You could go build a unit and play that unit and roll the characters up for that unit and enjoy it. And I think we need a little bit more of that. I'd like to see some new cool Merc units come out of the future if I were still involved.
Right. No kidding.
Now I'm just one of you guys. I'm a fan going, I hope they do that, but I don't know what they're going to do. So
right. Unfortunately, like the rest, welcome to the club, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I know. I've been booted down to just fanboy at this point.
Ace 1918 believes he knows whoever compiled the quote-unquote harassment evidence against you. I would encourage them to reach out to Mr. Pardoe privately. I won't, because they name names here. I wouldn't like to, throw that out there. Or
it's not. It also isn't necessary.
It isn't necessary. Not only that, but you've already done a lot of legwork on the people who had threatened you. So it's like you already kind of know. Regardless, but. All right, here we go. There we go. I'm going to go with James 296. This clansman humbly bows to the great Blaine L. Pardoe, and thank you for all the lore you have written. Let's hope... and by the way, clansman, not spelled with a K for any Catalyst employees out there who might be vigilant to this stream. Just FYI, and blow me. So, yeah, it's spelled with a C. Fuck off. But yes, thank you very much for joining the stream. Epic Slacker, all glory to the House of Blaine.
Well, we'll see.
Indeed. The Grizzly says, Michiganders represent will now play the Huron Warrior in every game anyway. He says, what's the most beloved mech that you've designed?
Oh boy. I can tell you the one I'm least proud of. That's easy, which is the Grand Titan. Totally freaking hated that, and there's a long story that goes with it. There were math errors. That's all I can say. I hated the Grand Titan. The best one I designed, I really couldn't say off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of them, and that's part of the problem. I like the Penetrator. I do like the Dominator. And Brent did the design on the Dominator, but I came up with the core concept of it. And I've always liked the Dominator. That came up, it's in the first book, Divided We Fall. of the new Ill Clan era. And I just love that design. Brent really took what my core idea was and blew it out perfect. And I got to contribute what the art, I told him this is how it should look type thing. And it was that was fun.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times what they do is hand us a picture and say, okay, come up with a design for this.
Jatha Rebellion asks a question that I know several people have wanted to know for a long time, including myself. Curious to get an insider perspective. Is there a particular reason Catalysts seem to love dunking on Rosselhog so much?
I never understood why we even made Rosselhog.
Thank you. Thank you.
It shows up in the 20-year update, and then we invade it and destroy it. And there's a part of me that's
like that one, by the way. Mage Leader is going to be very disappointed in that answer.
Well, but I like Rosselhog. I mean, they're neat people. They're fiery. They're independent. Blah blah blah. But it just kind of happened in the 20-year source book that Rosselhog appeared. And I remember when I got my draft copy of the 20-year source book when Fazza was around, I was like, how do I even pronounce this? And where the hell did this come from? And when I got the background on it, I was like, it's okay, but it's weird to have a state emerge out of nothing. Yeah. And that was the struggle I had with it.
Yeah. Emperor, oh wait, no. It's Justin H. Razor, Blaine brought my Ghost Knight canon character to life, made me feel extremely included in the community. He will be missed. Sad days for Battletech.
Thank you.
And I know, like, that work you did, like, cannot be emphasized enough how thankless that had to be. You've literally just got a list of names, you might have a description, something like that, to put the canon characters in. I don't know how you did it. I gotta be honest.
Okay, let's explain a few things. First of all, I wish that when Catalyst had done this, they had talked to the authors and said, what do you need? Because it's like, look, we don't need their backgrounds. We don't need their life stories. We don't need, just tell us the name of the character and tell us what faction they're in. That's all we need. Yeah. That's it. We get the spreadsheet. I have rarely seen such a fucked up thing in my life as the list for the canon characters. And I don't mean this in a bad way to the fans, but some of these guys wrote stuff that was insane. It's like, my canon character is the new Khan of Clan Wolverine in the Dark Age era, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we're literally not doing that story ever. So I don't know how your canon character is going to get involved. I had one character, when it said, what are their possessions? The field for it said a cell on the Prince Eugen. They were arrested as part of the, Prince Eugen, revolt during the Exodus, and they're in a prison cell and and I'm like, how the hell is anybody ever going to do a story on this? And some of these characters have these wild backgrounds. He was orphaned, and then he was this, and then he got picked up by this merc unit, and then he was raised in this house, and now he's a death commando. And I'm like, there's no room for anybody to, just explaining who he is 10 pages a book. It made it very difficult. You tended to focus on the people who wrote less, because you were like, oh, okay, this guy just says, I don't care what mech he pilots. I don't care what unit he's in. He's just in clan, whatever. Great. That guy was easy to use. Some of these people, I don't know how Catalyst is ever going to reconcile the fact that their stuff is never going to appear. And they've never addressed it, but to me, it was a big issue, and I think they've got to watch that going forward.
Well, especially now that you're gone, because, again, you were, like, one of the only guys who was actually religious with it in doing it regularly, in my opinion. Like, I didn't see a whole lot of the other authors doing it, and it's a headache. So for you to even get around to doing it was, in my opinion, laudable. Here's a can of worms. Not having to do with you, but Lupu donates 200 pesos, I believe. That's pretty awesome. Any idea how the entire IP rights mess started with Battletech? Now, I've talked about this in a video, Battletech versus Harmony Gold, I think is what it's called. He says, was Shoji Kawamori just selling his designs all willy-nilly to whoever asked for them, or was someone else just reselling designs to every Western company? Great interview. So to set the stage before you answer, so the big to-do for many years was when Jordan Weissman came up with the idea, or the Weissman brothers, correct, came up with the idea of Battletech. They were over in Japan. They had an idea for a war game, but when they saw the mecha designs of Macross, they said, oh, well, we can license these and we can get this out to market quicker that way. And so they licensed some designs directly from the creators of Macross. Unbeknownst to them, the creators of Macross had been double dealing, had already licensed them to Harmony Gold or some such. Harmony Gold is basically a holding company in America, and so that created the decades-long feud and back and forth legal drama between Battletech and what people in the West know as Robotech, but that Robotech is basically the Harmony Gold manifestation of Macross here in America. And do please correct me on any details if I have any of that wrong, but I just wanted to set the stage. So what do you think?
I honestly was never involved with it. I got a list at one point of, and I think I posted it on one of my blog posts, the actual list I got from Fazit going, these mechs can no longer be used in any fiction. And it's a column of mechs, and it said, and here's their replacement mechs. So like the replacement mech for the Archer was the Bombardier. And it was like, so anytime you were thinking about using the Archer, now use the Bombardier. And they really didn't explain to us as authors what the hell was going on. And it just wasn't actually a subject a lot of us got into, because our whole thing was, okay, we can't use these mechs. We can't use these mechs. We're good. Let us go write our books. So we didn't get pulled into all the weird legal stuff that was going on.
Okay. Yep. Good question. And I think we'll do maybe one or two more, and then we will wrap this bad boy up again. You guys hit us with so many questions and so much support for Blaine Pardoe. Everybody, if you want to support him, he's got an ongoing series, Blue Dawn. He's got lots of projects in the works. Go follow him on Twitter. I'll, of course, let you plug everything again at the end, but I wanted to go ahead and lay that out first. Napalm Boner Fart. Fantastic name. Not even a big fan of Battletech, but sad to hear what happened. Just bought Blue Dawn and Uncivil War paperback. They sound good, he says.
Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy them. I look forward to your review.
Micro Zombie, I demand a bachal for the copyright of Battletech. Mech Battle at Dawn or a football game for the ages. Make your choice.
I love the fact that he's referencing the football game, because it was such a horrible thing in the game. with the Ghost Bear, was it the Ghost Bears that they did the whole trial for a planet as a football game or something? I was like, oh my God.
My favorite.
It was like, what drugs were being used that week?
Right. Exactly. Let's see here. Clayton Machine 12, speaking of messaging Catalyst and Fanatics, was there ever an email for them? As all I've seen is their contact page with a phone number and mailing address. As long as I've seen it, it's just been a phone number and mailing address. So maybe they removed their email, maybe they didn't. I have no idea. But since I've been aware of it, it was just that. And again, I would urge all of you, don't harass anyone at these companies. The tech support guy and the person reading the emails did not make this decision. I would just urge you to mention, hey, when you capitulate to cancel culture, unfortunately that's poisoning the well on something that I've spent a lot of money on and that I love, which is Battletech, which I've been into. Well, I mentioned it at the outset, since the 90s. I think my first experience with it would be Mech Warrior 2, But my real inculcation into the world of Battletech was multiplayer Battletech on GameStorm and the trading card game, which I still have my starter box of back then, which I love. The trading card game, so underrated. I did tournaments of that. It was bigger than people remember. I'll just say that. It was a lot bigger than people remember. Because now it's kind of
it was a big game. I'm not a collectible card guy, but it had a huge following. Yeah. And I don't know why it suddenly just upped and disappeared. You know, there were a lot of products like that. I always thought Battle Troops was a good product as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's a number of the products that I think just over the years kind of got shelved. I think Aerotech needs a real big reskin, but that's my take on it.
Exactly. Commander Wolf, Knights of the Inner Sphere and Clan Wolverine team up when? Love them both, and they're the only true good clan. No, I love that. I had an idea for bringing back the Knights of the Inner Sphere in a different way. I agree with you. Bringing back the units, if you're gonna do it, I would rather it be done in a very different way. So that it's not the same. It's not just a new version of the same thing. It's like, because how do you bring back a unit with no consequences? I don't want to spoil my pitch, but I had an idea for that. Regardless, and last question of all, I think, before we wrap up here, and it really is ultimately the ultimate question in the BattleTech universe: Inner Sphere or Clan?
Ooh. You know, I read a lot of the Clan stuff, and I'm gonna say Clan. I enjoy, and the reason I say that is the clans are so hopelessly freaking flawed. You know, the whole concept of eugenics driving a people and a completely martial society, it's got that whole Klingon feel to it, and they're hopelessly doomed because they are beaten every time by people who don't play by the rules that they are so rigid to. And I think there's something almost, I look at the clans as very tragic. The clans ultimately are a giant tragedy because they're not destined, you know, to be able to hold anything. They're not built for that. They're built to conquer, invade, and fight. Holding and building empires is not in their bailiwick, and that's why I think the Ill Clan era has so much great potential, because the clans have won. They took Terra, and you know, the question now is, so what are you going to do now? And as a people, that's a big question for them to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, some, and you see this throughout history. There's actually a little bit of backstory in the next novel that's going to be coming out in my series about this. How certain governments and societies are suited to conquest, but not to rulership. And so sometimes you can win, but you can't win. You can't establish dominion after you actually conquer. And I like that story, actually, in terms of, and it has a historical precedent. But I can't thank you enough for joining us here today on this impromptu RazörForce offensive. As soon as I heard about all this, I knew I had to do some kind of stream with you. And we had been talking back and forth even before any of this ball of wax came rolling down, that we needed to talk at some point, because I'm such a huge Battletech fan. I've certainly taken care to try and shepherd people to the hobby, and I'm not necessarily going to stop that. I may shepherd them away from Catalyst products for a while until this is redressed, because that's all I want. And that doesn't mean necessarily, because you've already said they've wounded trust. You're an independent contractor, though. It'd be a different situation where it's like, hey, shoot us out a story, whatever, years down the road, whatever. I imagine it would be a slightly easier healing process down the road. But, you know, all I really want is for them to acknowledge that a wrong was perpetrated here, that this is not, it's not okay to cave to the woke mob, because once you start, it's never going to stop. And these people are not your editorial staff at the end of the day. Neither are you, and the difference between you and us and the woke mob is the woke mob are demanding that Catalyst kowtow to their creative whims. I don't want to know what's going to happen to Battletech, much less guide their editorial direction. You know, I just want it to be the apolitical entity that it's always been. And no, by the way, having a political composition within the setting is not being political. Having different sides warring against each other does not make Battletech inherently political. I've seen that counter argument, and it makes me want to blow a gasket. But I can't thank you enough. Would you please plug everything you're doing, because you are omnipresent because you're a very, very accomplished and I would dare say obsessive writer. You got a lot of stuff to tell.
I am productive.
Yeah.
Look, you know, go buy my stuff from other publishers at this point is all I will say. You know, you may want to buy the Battletech stuff because I don't know how long it'll be up.
That's the thing. Yeah, that I would say that.
And I feel bad about saying it that way. I just don't know. I don't know how low are they willing to go, and how vicious and nasty they may go, or how they may be forced to go. I don't know. So if there's stuff you've been sitting on the fence about, go buy it. I don't, you know, it's not going to help me or hurt me one way or the other. I think it's a safe assumption there's no more checks going to be coming from Catalyst for me anyway, so that's okay. They've made their choice. I'm not telling you to hate Catalyst. I'm not telling you anything other than this is what happened, and you need to form your own opinions, etc. My stuff, go up on Amazon.com. Bunch of books up there. Blue Dawn, A Most on Civil War. Obviously, I would appreciate it if you bought them and supported that. But, you know, any of my books out there from any publisher who has been supportive of me during this process, you know, I invite you to, you know, make sure they know it too. And so buy books from publishers that support me.
Okay. And RazörForce, I can't thank you enough for rallying behind this man. It was ridiculous what occurred. I won't end on any giant fuck you, because I've already spun in that chair and flipped those middle fingers, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll just leave it with, for Mr. Blaine Pardoe, for the entire Battletech community that are disappointed, not angry, but disappointed, and would urge those who remain in that situation, who are sane, to consider that they may have perpetuated a wrong here, or perpetrated a wrong. I am RazörFist, ladies and gentlemen. Godspeed, and no guts, no goddamn galaxy.